All right, welcome everyone. Feel free to type into the chat where you're tuning in from, your name, your role, what you do out in the world. And we'll get started right at the top of the hour. And just so everybody knows, we do have some breakout rooms planned. And so I understand not everybody can be on camera, but if you can be on camera, that's fantastic. If not, if you can come on camera for the breakout rooms, that's really helpful. I think we've all experienced being in a breakout room and nobody's on screen and it's a little awkward. So Sarah, where is your center located? The Center for Prevention and Counseling? Just curious. On a collegiate recovery program. That's okay. Northern New Jersey, nice. West Virginia collegiate recovery program. As you're joining, feel free to type your name into the chat. You can tell us your role and where you're tuning in from. Hi, Denise. Thanks for coming on camera. And we'll get started in just a moment, right at the top of the hour. Oh, a couple people here from the West Virginia Collegiate Recovery Program. Nice. And so we did just hit the top of the hour, Al. So I'll go through if you want to you can do the clicking and I'll do the talking for the opening slides and then I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds good.
Oh, and yes, we are recording. Perfect. All right. So welcome to Effective Survey Design Part 1. Today we're going to spend some time with Al Anka with Aurora Consulting. I've worked with Al in the past when I was at a recovery community organization in Minnesota, and he's fantastic. You can go to the next slide. Funding for this webinar was made possible through a SAMHSA grant. The views expressed in the materials or by the presenter are the views of that presenter and not necessarily the views of SAMHSA. Next slide. At the Peer Recovery Center of Excellence, we have 4 core teams that make up our center. So we focus on clinical integration of peer support workers into non-traditional settings. We also work with recovery community organizations to strengthen and build capacity. We have a workforce development team that works on enhancing the professionalization of the peer workforce. And then we also have a team working on developing and disseminating evidence-based practices. Next slide. And this is our language matters slide. So if we want addiction destigmatized, we need a language that's unified. So the words we use matter. And so we always want to use person first language in everything we do. And we never want to describe somebody as their disease or their diagnosis. Next slide. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We love to see your faces. So if it's possible to have your camera on, I realize that's not possible for everyone. Please do turn it on. Today's event is being recorded. We will be posting that recording publicly, just so everybody is aware post-training. When you're not speaking, if you can keep your line muted to keep background noise out of the presentation, that would be great, but do feel free to unmute because this will be an interactive session. And then feel free to use the chat feature. You can ask questions, make comments, or respond to other attendees throughout the training. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Al.
Thank you, Chris. Welcome, everyone. I'm Al Anka. I'm a principal consultant at Aurora Consulting. We are located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and work in the region locally with nonprofits of all shapes and sizes. And then we work nationally with a lot of informal education groups like museums, aquariums, zoo, things like that. And today I'm thrilled to be working with you all on effective survey design. So evaluation is my background, and I do a lot of work in evaluation. I also do a lot of participatory planning processes, which on this slide says strategic planning, but could be different kinds of group planning. And then we also do organizational leadership development, which includes a lot of work with boards and organizational culture change projects, of which all of these things, I have people that want to use surveys to collect information, collect feedback, do evaluation. And so it's a great topic for us today. So let's get started with a question. Go ahead and put this in chat. What do you think makes a survey effective? You can interpret that how you want. But go ahead and just type something into chat, whatever comes to mind. What makes a survey effective?
Are you seeing some of the responses, Al?
Yep.
Oh, well, okay.
A lot of good responses. If you're still typing, go ahead, keep typing. Few that we have here. Brandon says detail. Reaching the audience that you desire to reach. Yes, very important. People completing it, getting the information I'm looking for. Easy to understand. It's goal and outcome oriented. It has a purpose. Let's see, information that can be used for change, measures what you're trying to capture. Another, having a goal in mind, actionable results. Awesome. Great. We're going to be talking about a lot of this today and in our next session, which is on Thursday. So thanks for thinking about that. You can use the chat anytime today. If you have questions, we're a pretty small group. You can put it in chat. You can use the raise your hand feature if you like. However, you would like to gather my attention, I'll be able to see all that stuff. So why is it important to talk about survey design? This is one of my favorite trainings, and I think because surveys are the most used evaluation tool in the nonprofit sector, and they're a powerful tool. They have a lot of bang for the buck, so to speak, and they're often the first introduction that nonprofit practitioners, people working in nonprofits, have to evaluation. Right? If you think you need to collect feedback, one of the first things that comes to mind is doing a survey, right? I think that there's an idea that surveys are easy to write and implement. And I think that's because we just see surveys all the time. They're ubiquitous. You probably got a survey in your email today. But I've seen so many surveys that, people coming to me, nonprofits that have surveys, and they're developed and they don't really result in any learning or any action. And so they took a bunch of time, they took a bunch of effort, but they just kind of went nowhere once it came time to use it. So to me, this is a huge waste of time. It's a huge waste of opportunity. It's not a good relationship with the people that you're serving or surveying. And so today, I hope you learn a few things that will help your surveys be more effective, to help you get more out of them, and to avoid kind of the post-survey slump where you did all the work and then nothing really came out of it, right? So today, we're going to be thoughtful about a few things. And the first one is, why am I doing this survey? Very critical first question that we're going to spend some time on. We are going to talk about how will my participants experience it. We're going to touch on that today. And this is going to be kind of a theme throughout the 3 days of training. And then lastly, what will make my questions effective? We're going to start that today and spend a lot of time on that on Thursday. This is the survey design process. I like to show this just so that you get a sense of all the steps that are a part of doing a survey project. And then also to kind of orient you to where we're going to spend our time. So today and Thursday, we're going to be really talking about the first three. So how do you plan for a survey? How do you build a survey in the sense of how do you write the questions? We're not going to be talking about putting surveys into software, things like that. And then throughout, we're going to just talk a little bit about testing your survey, some different methods for that. Next month, when we get together, we're going to be talking a lot more about distribute. We're not going to be talking as much about reporting. Hopefully you're doing surveys that are very easy to report on. I'm not a scientist. A lot of you, well, I don't know, maybe some of you are scientists, but for the most part, when we're doing surveys, we're trying to get straightforward responses. We're not using statistics, things like that. And then use is always the reason why we do surveys, and we will talk about how to do planning, building, and testing in order to improve the use of your survey. Our agenda today, again, we're talking about survey purpose, participant experience, question stems. Thursday, we're talking about answer options. July 8th, understanding your audience, making it easy to respond, and tailoring your appeal to get people to respond. So that's just a little overview. You received a packet of information, of documents, I should say, in your email. If you do not have that or you didn't get it, I just put a link into the chat. I'll highlight a few. You may find it helpful to have the packet that's in that link available, because it has some instructions that you'll use when you go into breakout rooms. If you're not able to access it, you'll probably still be fine, but that's there for you to download along with the slides and some of the other documents. Cool. That's the intro. I think let's get started. So we are going to start with, why am I doing this survey? Everything about designing a survey is harder if we don't clarify and really examine why we're doing it. And so we're going to take some time right now to answer some big questions about your survey that will help you prevent big problems down the line. And the biggest problem that I usually see when nonprofits do surveys, again, it's not like a catastrophe. It's not like a crash and burn situation. It's more just that the results end up being kind of blah. Like you get the results and you're like, oh, this is interesting. Like what, like, how are we going to, like, what are we going to do with this? They're not fully used. They might not be fully cared about. And again, that's just a huge expense. You don't have extra time to be doing stuff that you don't use. And so let's avoid that by trying to think through some grounding questions at the outset of planning a survey. So what are those big questions? The first one is what do I need to know? Before you write questions for your survey that people would fill out, you need to figure out what's the purpose of the survey, right? What do you need to know in order to take action? What are things that you could know that you could take action on? Are there things that we always use the term nice but not necessary? Are there things that you're like, oh, that would be good to know, but like actually now that I think about my purpose, we don't really need that. The second question is, who knows it? This kind of has two layers to it. A lot of times when we do surveys, we start with the audience. So you come into the idea of a survey saying, hey, we need to survey our members, or we need to survey our clients, right? And so you kind of have the audience in mind at first. If that's the case for you, you need to do kind of a double check and say, given what I want to know, do these people really know what I'm asking? Are they the right group for these questions? Are there other sources of information that could help us answer this question, right? The third big question is, how will I use the results? The purpose of a survey is to get results that you can use for something. And figuring out how exactly you are going to use the results, figure out who's going to use the results, right? Who's on the team. This will help you focus your survey and ensure that you get results that you can use. And then lastly, what is the best method? So this is a training about surveys. We're not really going to be talking about other methods, but this is your gut check time. If you wrote a survey that has 10 essay questions, you wrote an interview. It's going to be a lot more effective to talk with someone for those types of questions than it is going to be to send a survey. And so once you've thought through all this stuff, you just need to say, okay, we thought we were going to do a survey. Is that really going to work? A survey is a particular method. It has strengths. It has weaknesses. Do those match up with our purpose, with how we're going to use this? Is there another method that would work better? I hear a lot of people describing a survey to me and I say, it seems like you could maybe just phone a friend. Like you could maybe talk to just a few people and get a lot of answers without going through like a whole survey. So that's the last question. So let's practice this and then we'll have some time. The way I like to do trainings is do a little bit of presentation, let you try it out and then come back and ask questions because then you're thinking a little bit, right? So let's try that out. In a moment, we will, I just got a question from Joseph. Can you tell me a little bit more what your question is, Joseph? You can just come off and mute, that's fine. Okay, I'm not hearing Joseph. If you're not able to speak into the room, Joseph, go ahead and you can just chat as well, and I can see if I can answer your question. Dennis asked a question, just a clarifying question before we go into our breakouts about what's the difference between a survey and an evaluation. If you think of a Venn diagram, those are overlapping, right? But they're not quite the same thing. An evaluation is you doing some kind of data gathering to answer, to gather information that you don't know, right? So you're reaching out, you might be assessing your program. You might be using the same methods to do like an environmental scan, who's out there doing stuff similar to us. And an evaluation could use multiple different kinds of methods, like interviews, surveys, focus groups, activities, things like that. A survey is just one kind of data collection method. So today we're talking about surveys as one particularly important type of data collection that organizations use. Okay, so let's go into our breakout rooms, and we're gonna put you into breakout rooms of 3 people each. And I'm hoping that one of you in the room will have a survey or an idea for a survey. So something you've already done that you've been thinking about, or something that you maybe could do that you're thinking about as you come to these trainings. If nobody does, you can look at the survey examples in the packet. There's a document called survey examples and has 2 surveys in there. Once someone volunteers their survey idea, don't worry about like explaining everything about it. We don't need all the background. Instead, just have the other 2 people in the room ask the 4 big questions. And your job, if you have the survey, is to try to answer these questions. I'm going to put these in chat so you have them when you go in. If you're the one asking the questions, ask some probing questions. Like if they seem unclear about what the purpose of the survey is, say, what do you really mean by that? You know, what do you really need to know? So try to help them out, think it through, because these are not easy questions, right? So with that, you're going to have 10 minutes. Any final clarifying questions before we break out? Go ahead and just come off of mute or chat us. Okay, cool. I hope you enjoy meeting each other. If you have run into problems, there should be like a help button in your breakout rooms or request assistance or something. You can just click that and we'll come help you out. Okay, Shannon, would you mind sending us off?
Absolutely. So you'll get a pop-up message that says so-and-so is inviting you to join breakout room number blank. Just go ahead and click accept and I'll bring you in. And I'll send you a message when you have 1 minute left. So we'll reconvene here about 12:31. That's Central Time. Just making sure no one's by themselves. All right, looks good.
Welcome back. Okay, welcome back. Shannon, do you know if did you close the rooms or are people still trickling back?
Looks like we're all back now.
Okay, awesome. Okay. I hope that you had a good conversation and enjoyed meeting each other. For those of you thinking about your own survey, which of the 4 questions, I'll put these up, was most helpful for you to think through, or felt like it would be helpful to think through more? And you can just go ahead and come off of mute if you want to share with us. Yeah, Jen.
I'm Jen Palo from Brown University in Rhode Island. Interestingly, you would think who knows it would be the most obvious one, but as I thought it through, I realized there was another side of the survey, people, the client side, that I just kind of overlooked for some reason. You know, I have a worker and a client, and as I'm designing this, I'm thinking I'm designing it in my mind for the worker, but the client has a perspective too. And as simple as that sounds, I overlooked it before I reviewed these questions. So I thought that was pretty interesting, where the more challenging ones were easy for me. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, who knows it, I think, is a sleeper question because we assume we know who knows it. If you have a lot of questions, if you've been doing a survey and a lot of questions are skipped, or if you are having a hard time getting people to take the survey, that might point to relevance. So you might be targeting the wrong people because they feel like they don't know the answers. Or you may need to communicate more about why they are the right people to fill out that survey. Actually, the biggest thing I've been getting on a soapbox about this with everybody recently. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see with writing survey questions is that we ask the questions that we ourselves need to answer, rather than the questions that the people we're asking know the answers to. The best example of one example of this is we ask the question, how could we improve? That's the question we need to answer as the people in charge of improving, right? We need to figure out that's actually a really hard question for people who are surveying. They're not thinking about that kind of thing. The question I started using recently is, did you have an experience that you wished was different? That's a very specific question that they can answer that helps us understand things we might need to improve, right? So another just kind of nuance about how do you think about audience when you're thinking about a survey? Okay, another person, what's another question that was helpful for you? Just jump in if you can.
I can say something. I think, how will I use the results? I actually am the sole evaluator on this one specific grant in our nonprofit agency. So determining what I'm trying to get out of the results and what kind of time I have to put into the collection and kind of analysis and then debriefing of those results is important for me. So how will I use the results kind of determines almost what's my best method, right? Because if I do a survey on paper versus if I do a survey on SurveyMonkey, it's going to be really different for data collection.
Definitely. Yep. Yeah. Thank you for that. If this is for everybody, if thinking about this question, how will I use the results? If you can't identify who's going to use the results, that's an indicator that you'll have to think more about this question. If you can't say how results have been used in the past, if you don't know, that's another indicator that you're going to have to dig more into this question. And this question is actually a really good prompt. What I would suggest is that, you have this packet. You can use this worksheet that's in the packet as a way to call for a meeting at the beginning of a survey project. And so, if you're Sarah, you would say, okay, who is going to use the results? I'm going to get those people in a room, and we're going to talk about these 4 questions, right? This is a 60-minute meeting, but it'll make a huge difference for the usability and quality of your survey. And it's the type of thing that we often skip because we think that surveys are easy, right? We think that we understand how we're going to use them. But none of this is easy. All this takes work to figure out. Anyone else have any comments about what was helpful for them or questions about how to think about these questions? Brandon said in the chat, what got me thinking was, what is the best method? Brandon, do you want to say anything more about that? What were you considering?
It really just kind of confused me, like, what is my best method? Is it the tools of collecting data, or it really, that's the only one that kind of confused me with the whole exercise.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So surveys are one method. And so, you could think of different kinds of methods that you would use for gathering information. Interviews are another type of method. A review, maybe you can answer your questions just by Googling around. Research is a way that you can answer. Maybe someone's published something that you can use, and you don't have to ask anybody to answer your questions, right? So once you understand what you need to know, yeah, Brandon said focus groups, absolutely. I think the confusing thing with surveys is that usually we start with the method. We're like, hey, we need a survey of our members, right? So those are 2 things we need to know. One is your audience, one is your method, but purpose always overrides any of these other questions, because if you're not going to achieve your purpose, like, it's not going to be successful. So sometimes we kind of go back and say, okay, that's great. We want to do a survey, but like, let's figure out what we really need to know here. And then you can, double check, is a survey the best method? Sometimes a survey is the only method because it's the only way you can reach people. And so then you kind of have to say, okay, well, like, how can we do the best job we can answering our purpose, given the limitations or benefits of a survey? So that's what that one's designed to help you think through. If you have mostly open-ended questions, a survey is really hard. People don't like typing. That's just the fact. If you have complex questions, that's hard for a survey because it's a lot of thinking. Surveys are great for simple questions, right? If your audience doesn't have good internet access, if they would struggle to use computers, you have to think through, like, is doing an online survey the best? Do I want to do a paper survey? Things like that. In your slides, I have a link to a blog article about this worksheet. And so if you want to gather some people together to answer this together and have a meeting, you can send them the blog article, and it has a little bit of explanation about what these questions are and a link to the worksheet. So that's a resource you can use as well as the worksheet you have in your packet. So to kind of wrap up this section, knowing the purpose of your survey, knowing the audience of your survey, knowing the use of your survey is going to help you tailor your survey for the best fit, because you cannot take one survey and just copy paste it and give it to another group. It doesn't work like that. Your surveys are more effective the more tailored they are to your audience, to your use, and to your purpose. And so that's why they're a lot of work, right? So this worksheet will help you tailor that. And for the rest of our trainings, we're also going to be talking about, like, how do you tailor this to what you need? One other resource I'm not going to present about, but I just want to share with you. If you are doing a survey as a part of assessing like your program, you want to find out what people's experience was in your workshop, in your program, you want to find out impact, things like that, then you're going to have outcomes to assess. And I have a really helpful article about a specific type of logic model called Bennett's hierarchy, which is very simple to use and is very helpful for thinking about what are the outcomes that I should be thinking about for a program. And so this is just a resource for you to use if that's something that's helpful for you. Okay, let's shift a little bit. We've been thinking about surveys from our point of view, the survey maker. And now we want to think about them a little bit from our participants' point of view, the survey taker. Okay. So let's start. The great thing about surveys is that everyone actually has a lot of experience with surveys because you fill them out yourself, right? Go ahead and go into chat. And let's just start with the first question here. I'm going to put it in chat so we can keep track of it. What do you like about taking surveys? What's a reason you would take a survey? You get them in your email all the time. Sometimes you take them, sometimes you don't, right? What makes a good survey that you like taking? Go ahead and just take a minute to type some ideas in. Okay, let's go through a few of these. Thank you for answering. Sarah said, feeling like my input is valued. Sharing something positive or negative for change, to create change, right? So feeling like the time you're going to put into this survey will make a difference, right? It's worth it to you. A few things about how easy the survey will be to take. So Joni said short multiple choice questions. Yep, we love those for surveys. Easy to answer questions, relevant questions. Easy to answer questions are questions that you know the answer to, right? You don't have to like sit and think too hard. Concise, not repetitive, not too long. Yeah, we don't like the surveys where they ask the same thing like 3 different ways. It feels like a test. We don't want to be tested. It's not pleasant. So a lot of things about ease of use. A few things about Brandon said, I get something out of it. You might get a reward or a reward for completion. And a few people talking about feeling like I'm actually helping. So it feels good to help someone. And then Ken said, questions that seem relevant or that I feel qualified to answer. So again, you're the right audience. You feel like you're the right person to fill out the survey. Cool. Let's do the other one. What do you not like about taking surveys? And if you want to just come off of mute and say yours, that'd be great too. I'd love to hear some people's voices.
I'll unmute. I'll take a chance, Al, just to
Thank
maybe
you.
start the ball rolling. I know people are answering in the chat, but
Yeah.
in our small group, we talked about like receiving a survey that apparently wasn't inclusive of us. So meaning someone gave the example of they were using a business product, and the business sent out a survey, and this person works for a nonprofit, and the survey was geared towards like a for-profit business. So although they used the product, the survey, they couldn't even respond appropriately because none of the questions aligned with their organization. And that
Right.
was really frustrating. And it could even cause somebody to maybe like change their service to say, like, if I'm not even in your rear view mirror as a client, like, why am I paying you this monthly fee to use your product?
Right. Yeah. You don't feel like you're the right person, or they didn't, in this case, you feel ignored. The survey is actually negative for you because you're like, oh, I thought I was a part of this group, but apparently I'm not. It's not a good feeling. I think of, it's kind of a random example. I think of surveys as like, if you've ever had to send out like a mass email, if it's people that you care about, if you do what I do, I have like my big text like thing of email I have to send out. But then before that, I put like 2 sentences that is like something I know about them. Like, hey, Chris, like, how are your kids doing? I just got something quick to ask you, right? And it makes it more personal. And you feel more like it's a relational activity. But it takes time. And this is the type of thing with surveys. You can tell when the person who sent the survey did not take any time to figure it out, right? And it doesn't make you want to participate. The more time you put into it, the better response, the better data you're going to get from your participants. Thanks for sharing that, Chris. A lot in here about long. I see a lot of time and long as a theme here. We have to give our time to fill out surveys, so it has to be worth it, right, for us to do it. Dennis said, if they ask for too much personal information, definitely. If we don't know why they're asking the questions or what they're going to do with it, it's like, wait, why would I give this to you? I don't know you, right? Poorly worded questions, you don't feel taken care of as a participant if the questions aren't written well, right? Ken doesn't like to type. That's everybody, Ken. Nobody wants to type any essay questions. They want it to be easy. And it's hard to do essay questions on your phone, which is a barrier. Oh, sorry, Denise. Sorry if I've been calling you Dennis this whole time. Renata said, not person-centered. Can you come off of mute and tell us a little bit more about what you're thinking there?
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm actually out, but I'll go ahead and share. So a lot of families within the community I serve said that the questions are indirect. I believe someone spoke to general questions, and that was a big issue. It wasn't person-centered. It was more so based on the whole group versus making them feel as an individual.
Gotcha. Yep. Cool. Thank Thank you for sharing. So I like this activity because you have already identified all the things that you should be thinking about when you're designing surveys. It's a little bit easier said than done. It's hard to get out of our heads when we're designing surveys. But the trick is to have some methods to like take a clean look at your survey, because I've been doing surveys for a long time and I still write terrible surveys all the time. So it's not a matter of like getting it perfect. It's a matter of being able to like take a step back and say, okay, hold on. Like, how would, like, are these questions clear? Do I understand who my audience is? How would people respond to this? How would I respond to this if I got it? You know, what would I feel like if I got this survey? Those are all tools that you have already that you can use to make your own surveys better. So a survey, I would encourage you to think of a survey as a relationship. And the relationship is between you as the survey maker and your participants who are the survey taker. And both of these parties to this relationship have needs, right? And so you, as the survey maker, you're kind of in charge of the relationship. You have to balance your needs with the participants' needs. And if they're unbalanced, you won't have a good relationship, right? So your needs as the survey maker are for people to take the survey and to do a good job taking it, right? To pay attention to it and try their best. The number one survey taker need is not to take your survey, right? If they didn't get your survey, they probably don't care. And so you have to think about what are the, like, what would encourage someone to take a survey? What would prevent them from taking a survey? How can I communicate in order to promote this survey and get people engaged? We're going to talk a lot more about that in July at our training. But we're also going to be talking about what makes for a good participant experience when they're in the survey. So if they've started it, what's going to keep them moving and feeling like they're taken care of? Chris started a survey and then she was like, wait, what is this? You know, I thought this was cool, but it's not. We're gonna talk about how to avoid that. Susie asked a question, are incentives effective to increase response rate? We're gonna talk more about that in July. I'll give you the preview right now. Incentives can be effective. The trick is that incentives are not always obvious. So for example, an incentive that someone already named is feeling like you're helping. People like to feel like they're helping someone. So if you have a program that you know your participants care about, if you ask for help, that's an incentive, right? People are like, oh, I would like to help because I care about this program, right? So that encourages people. Monetary incentives, the really interesting fact about that is that small value incentives given first before they take the survey are more effective than larger incentives given afterwards. Does anyone have an idea why that might be? Anyone have a guess?
They might
I
then,
think, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry about that. They might then feel obligated to reply instead of not.
Yeah, it's reciprocal gift giving. That is a long tradition in human history, is reciprocal gift giving. And so it's about this slide. It's a relationship. If someone gives you something, even if it's small, you feel like, oh, I should reciprocate, right? Let's say you're going to do a survey and you're like, we're going to do a $50 incentive for people to fill out this survey. What if your audience is lawyers? They see it as a payment for their time, and that's not worth it. They make more money not taking your survey than taking it. So your goal is to make incentives feel like a relationship rather than a payment, right? An economic payment. for the most part. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to talk more about encouraging survey response July 8th. If you haven't signed up for that, it's a cool training, and we're going to look at a lot of examples. If you're doing email surveys, this is really going to help. So you can sign up for that. Oh, we're not taking a break, sorry, because we're only doing an hour and a half. So let's shift. We've got a half an hour left. Let's shift to our last question for today. What will make my questions effective? And we're going to split this into two. We're going to split this into two parts, and we're going to do the first part today and the second part on Thursday. So the first part is about question stems. Question stems are the technical term for the actual question part of a survey question. So if you think of a survey question as like a question and then a bunch of check boxes, the question stem is the question, right? It's not the check boxes. It's like a sentence stem, you know. And I'm going to give you a bunch of tips for writing question stems. And the reason I split this out is because what I typically do when I'm writing surveys is I write all the stems first. It's a little bit easier to brainstorm your questions if you're not so much worried about the answer options, right? It's easier to stay true to your purpose if you're just like, I'm just going to write the questions, right? Forget about how they're going to respond. The way I literally do this is I get a deck of index cards and just sit at a big table and just like write one question on each index card, put it on the table, you know, then you can, it's kind of fun, you rearrange them and you can kind of visualize what your survey is going to look like from there. So I would encourage you to do that, or at least try it when you're writing a survey. I don't ever like to do it if you're using survey software, I don't ever like to write questions in the survey software. You get too distracted. You got to do a draft on a piece of paper. So let's talk about what makes question stems effective. And all of these, this is a lot of content. So all of this is in your packet. And I hope that this is a good introduction. And then when you actually go to write your survey, you can refer to that packet as you do it. So let's get started. The first tip is, I don't think it's obvious, but it's really fundamental, is that you want to ask a question. So I see this all the time. You're doing demographics and you just type age, colon, right? That feels more like a command, and it's not like a relationship, right? We want our surveys to feel like a conversation between two people. You wouldn't just walk up to someone and say, age, you know? So we want to always write questions. It's more natural for people to read questions, and it's more pleasant, right? It's more respectful. So we would simply just say, what is your age, right? That's a nicer way to do that. This is one of my favorite examples of all time of surveys. This is an actual survey that I got from a client that we were going to work on. And I just want you to take a look at this survey question and come off of mute and just tell me anything you notice about this survey question.
I want to know its relevance. Why do I want to list the number of types of bears? And you give me a box, and when I think of list, I think of doing a carriage return, and I don't have room for that.
Yeah. Thank you, Denise. It's the first question, right? So hopefully hopefully this makes sense why they're asking about bears, right? It's not a question. It's a request, right? This one doesn't feel rude. I mean, it says please, but usually I always try to have question marks, right? That's why we have surveys, is because we have question marks. So put them in your questions. It's the very first question and it's required, right? So let's go to our question writing tip. We want to avoid frustrating or burdensome questions. And that to me is an example of a question that has a high potential to be frustrating or burdensome, right? Please list as many types of bears as you can. Okay, like, do you want real bears? Do you want cartoon bears? Like, do you want gummy bears? Like, what are we doing here? I could list bears for 10 minutes, right? Other people are like, teddy bears, you know? You can see how, yeah, Yogi and Boo Boo, is that what we want here? This puts a lot of mental burden on the participant, right? It feels like a test. We don't ever want surveys to be tests, right? That's a test is a test, right? We're not usually trying to test the people we're asking. Here's another example. When was the last time you attended this program? Do you want the day? Do you want the week? Do you want the month? Like, what do you want here? It would be better to be more specific here, right? To help them figure out, like, what's the right way to think about this question. So you could ask, have you attended this program in the last 12 months? It's a yes or no question, right? That assumes that you understand how you're going to use this question, right? If you don't have any clue how you're going to use this question, then you usually ask it in the most open-ended way possible. When was the last time you attended? But if you've already figured out that, hey, we don't care if people attended 3 years ago versus 4 years ago, we only care if they've attended in the last 12 months, then you have a much simpler, easier question that you can ask, right? So that's a way in which you thinking through your purpose really helps the participant give better information, right? Okay. Another question stem writing tip. So this is related. Be specific and ask what you really want to know, right? You want to avoid, how could we improve this program? That's a really big question. It's not specific. You're going to get all sorts of different kinds of answers and you're going to have a hard time interpreting them, right? So you could pick something more specific. Was the length of this program too long, too short, or just right? That's an easier question to answer. It's a more usable question for you. We call it the Goldilocks question. Again, it assumes that you've thought through, what do I need to know here? What could I actually, if I found out that everyone thought it was too long, could we shorten it? Yeah, we could. Okay, well, let's ask, right? Okay, next, balance questions to avoid introducing bias. This is a little bit harder one to notice, but once you get used to it, it becomes kind of second nature. So the top one, how clear were the staff's instructions to you? You have cemented the idea that clear is what instructions should be. And if you didn't think they were clear, what's wrong with you? Right? We want to always make it okay to give any answer to participants, because that's what we want to know. We want to know the real answer, not the answer that they think they should give, right? So this one's very simple to change. Were the instructions from the staff clear or confusing? I think of this as giving permission to say that it's confusing. You're giving permission to give a negative response by acknowledging that it could be possible, right? The next one We're going to do 2 more and then do a little bit of practice. Use language your audience would find natural and conversational. This is kind of like that relationship idea. We want to make it feel like 2 people are talking in the survey. So at the top, we have, how much did this program increase your knowledge on the topic? I can tell you where this language came from. It came from the grant proposal. We wrote a grant that said this program would increase participants' knowledge on the topic. And then we thought, oh, we better ask about that in the survey. And so we just took that language and rewrote it, right? We can do a little bit better. So the bottom one is an attempt to make that more conversational. How much did you learn during this program? Right? That sounds more like something I would say out loud, which is what we're shooting for. Okay, the last one. Don't ask 2 questions in one. If you have an and, if you have commas, if you have an or in your question, it's probably more than 1 question, or it could be a very complex question, which would benefit from breaking it up into pieces. So this is a kind of classic example. How quick and easy was registration? What we've probably done is we want to know whether they liked registration, and we used quick and easy as a way to stand for what good registration should be. But it's confusing. If it was quick but not easy, like, how do I rate this? If it was easy but not quick, how do I rate this? So if we truly care about learning about quickness and easiness, then we would ask this as 2 questions, right? Was it quick? Yes or no? Was it easy? Whatever. We like short questions. So if you have a really long question, again, it's a sign that you might need to rethink, like, what am I really trying to ask about here? How can I simplify what I'm asking about? Renata said language is so important. Truly, and depending on your audience, you might have to think about language a lot, right? If you, usually we shoot for like kind of a 6th grade reading level for all surveys. If you have professionals, you can use technical language that they might understand. A lot of times the thing I see is that we use the language that we use in the program internally as staff people, rather than language that the survey participants would understand, right? And then of course, if you have English language learners, if you have multiple languages, that's a whole other type of accessibility that you have to really, really be thinking hard about. Okay, let's try this out. Oh, sorry, I need to intro this. So you're going to get into breakout groups for about 10 minutes. Actually, I'll just do the instructions first. I'm going to give you a link to a survey, and just look through it. There's a bunch of questions. They're not super long, but there's 10 questions on it. Just read through the first couple. And I want you to read the question out loud. So have one person read the question out loud to your group, and then see if you can revise just the first part. So just the actual question. You don't have to worry about what the options are. So think about some of these tips. You can review them in the packet. They're all written there. And see if you can come up with some ideas for how to revise some of the questions on your survey. Now, the reason I want you to read it out loud is because this is one of the easiest yet effective ways to test your survey. You can think of it just like if you're writing a speech. If you're trying to write something, reading it out loud is a really helpful way to feel like, does this sound right? Right? So this is my penance. I wrote this survey. This is actually an interview question. I wrote this a long time ago, and I read it out loud to my partner, and she was like, what the heck are you talking about? I don't even understand what the question is. So I do it every time. I'll read it out loud now so that I can atone for this. The question was, in the time since our last interview, do you think you are interacting with evaluation more, less, or about the same amount as the period before our interview? you can't even remember what I said by the time I get to the end. When I wrote this, I was like, oh, this is very clear. But when I say it, it's like, got to figure out another way to answer this. So read it out loud and then talk about how you might revise it. So I'm going to put this in chat. You can use any survey you want. There's 2 surveys on there. Just pick the one you want. Doesn't matter what room you're in. The link goes to the survey document and the instructions are the same as what I just did. So Shannon, can we go in for 10 minutes?
Yep, I'll give you guys, same message pop-up will come as before, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning before we come back.
Cool, thank you. So my group that was working on my question that I shared, did you come up with anything?
I mean, it's a little ambiguous
Did.
because we don't have context, but we basically said we'd break it down into a time frame with a possible, with like, either
asking how long it had been since their last interview. So is it 1 to 2 months, 2 months, or 3 months to 4
Yeah.
months? And break it up so it was multiple choice. easy
either
to
ranges
answer.
or less than 2 months or more than 2 months, and just 2 options.
And then we would move on to a second question that said, before that interview, was your level of engagement, or please rate your level of engagement. So we would break that up as well into multiple choice. And then the third question would be, after that interview, how do you feel your level of, or
Please
what-
rate your level of engagement
Yeah.
again.
please re-rate your level of engagement now, currently. And then the data team would then see the difference and be able to infer and not just ask their opinion about their level of engagement change.
Nice. That's awesome. We're going to talk, I just made a note. We're going to talk more specifically about that kind of pre-post survey questions at our next, usually I don't talk about it too much, but we have a little bit of extra time at our next meeting. So we'll talk specifically about that because that's a strategy that people need to understand the right uses for. But I loved, so for everyone joining the group that was just talking, they actually were looking at the bad question that I wrote and trying to figure out how to make it a little bit, let's see if I can pull it up and try to make this a little bit easier. And so what I really liked that you did was that you took a question that made you hold 2 ideas at once in your head. The first idea, which was, when was my last interview? And then the second idea is, okay, how much have I been using evaluation? And you split it into 2 ideas. So you only have to think about one at a time. That's a lot easier for people to think about, right? Okay, we've only got about 5 minutes left. I would love to hear from some of the groups, just what you ended up talking about. Which question were you working on and what did you notice about it? If you had a rewrite, I would love to hear that too. Anyone willing to jump in?
Yeah, we worked on the your opinion counts. We looked at number 5, and we wanted to change the wording on it. So we put, how would you rate the communication between staff and parents? It seemed better with the multiple choice answers. And then we were working on 7, maybe breaking it up into 2 different questions, but we didn't quite get there. So
Okay, good. And we're going to talk a lot more about rating next time. Yeah, Joni.
So when we looked at this questionnaire, we worked on a couple of the specific questions, but really overall, we weren't sure what we would do with the answers at the end of the day. So.
Yeah, and we you know, whenever we look at survey examples, I love getting surveys in my email because I always use them as examples. But I always have to remind myself that, like, we don't know in the end the purpose. We have to trust the person, you know, the entity that's sending it to us. And so even when we look at these Head Start questions, a lot of which I think could be written a lot better. It could be that they were able to use this and it worked just great for them. I would hope so. But it's hard. That's the hard thing about looking at these examples, is we don't have that context of, like, what is the real purpose of this to drive the questions. Yeah. Did you come up with any answers, Joni?
With what we would do with it, or with the specific questions?
Either.
Well, with the specific questions, certainly how well do staff answer your questions? We really liked your example instead, were the instructions from the staff clear or confusing? Because we really appreciate the importance of letting people know they could answer to the negative. Yep. Especially when you're working with an agency and parents, I think sometimes they're hesitant to do that. So that was one of the questions that we looked at.
Nice. Great. Anybody else look at a different question that you want to just share what you thought about with that question?
Sure, I'll speak up
Thanks, Jen.
for my team. My team was awesome, by the way, Jonathan and Teresa. I'll just look at number one. How easy was it for you and your family to enroll in the Head Start program? My team thought that you and your family could have had different experiences. So number one, that could have been broken out. Also, how easy was biased, right? Maybe it wasn't easy. So we identified bias as well in that question.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and that's with this Head Start one, a lot of this just isn't that balanced. So they just say easy, they just say well. And then they're not very clear about like the thing they're actually asking about, right? So how well do staff answer your questions is not as specific as were the staff's instructions clear or confusing, right? And so it feels like it feels like they had, your kid was in a Head Start program for a year and like, this is the general purpose survey you get at the end. That's hard, it's hard to get good information out of that. Okay, we've got just 2 minutes left. I'll stick on if anyone has any burning questions that they want to ask me. But what I'm going to give you just a quick couple pieces of information, and then I have one reflection question for you to just type into chat. So our next training is on Thursday, same time, and I'm assuming you'll get an email with a link to that. Yep, Shannon's saying yes. And we're going to talk more about answer options and really dig into that. If you have a survey and you want me to use it as an example for workshopping, I promise I'll be kind. That is a very eye-opening, that will help you learn. Please take a moment right now, or as soon as you get off of this, to email me that survey, and we can workshop it as a group and talk about examples. So make sure it's something you can share. But I'm going to put that in chat right now, my email. So save this. If you can also, the second page of the packet also has my email on it. And you can just email that directly to me. And then I just also wanted to say that the center has paid for a few organizations to get some coaching on your survey. And so you can sign up for having an hour consultation with me about a survey that you have. That's something that I'm going to give you more information about at the end of the next training. So you'll go through the 2 trainings, and if you want, you can sign up to get some in-person help from me. So with that, my last question for you is, what is something you learned today that is relevant to your survey, or something you want to do in the future? So take just a minute to think about that. Type it into the chat. I would love to see it. And while you're doing that, I'll just say thank you so much for your attention, your engagement today. I hope this first part was helpful. We're going to dig in even more in our next 2 parts. And I look forward to seeing you then. I'll turn it over to Shannon and Chris for any final words.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for participating. We hope you can come back on Thursday and again on July 8th. And join us for more learning about surveys. This is really valuable information because we all work with the participatory process. So it's really vital for us to have a really good, firm understanding of how best to ask questions and have people reply. So thanks a lot, Al. We appreciate your time today. And I appreciate the time from all of you. So look for an email with a reminder of the login for Thursday's session.
Oops. Great. And I forgot, I'm trying to copy the info for the July session, but I copied the wrong thing.
We'll send it out in an email.
Okay,
No
cool.
big deal.
You'll send
No
it
big. Yeah. All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Okay.
Sorry,
If you
before
have
we
questions,
before I hang up, Denise, did you have a question? Were you raising your hand a couple times?
Oh, that was about how I sign up for the July 8th, because I thought it was just parts 1 and 2, but there's a third part on July 8th, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Yes. We'll send out an email with the link to register.
All right, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Thanks, everyone.